And they've done some studies like in the first 4 weeks of the life, no, first 4 months of the life of an infant, the mother and child does this cycle of joy and rest up to 300 to 400 times a day. And that joy rest cycle is really the cycle by which the baby's brain organizes itself on top of a foundation of joy and peace. Because that cycle of joy and
Wow.
rest that you're building, a foundation of joy and peace, you're building a very resilient child that's set up, to learn the rest of the relational skills they're meant to learn as infants really well with that joy and peaceful cycles with mother and then mom and dad.
Our children are leaving the faith in droves.
As a result.
Oh, I got to pause here.
We're going live right now.
How can we raise our kids to stand firm, have a faith that lasts, and navigate such a time as
We're
this?
here to report that our nation's capital has just been...
To turn a nation, you have to take the next generation.
Today in the news, COVID-19 numbers.
I'm Jake McCandless, and this is my podcast, Stand Firm Parents. We're working together to help our children have a faith that lasts.
And now, here's Jake McCandless.
We're continuing a conversation that we had in the previous episode, talking about brain science and what it reveals about discipleship and transformation. Talking to the co-author of a groundbreaking book called The Other Half of Church. Again, that book's not talking about who's sitting on the other side of the auditorium or who's in the back, who's in the front. Rather, it looks at brain science over the past couple decades, what scans have revealed and studies have revealed, and looks at how if we understand more about the brain, it helps us understand how to better be discipled and disciple others. It helps with spiritual growth. Fascinating topic. So throughout this series about a fully integrated faith, I've been talking to people whose disciplines aren't necessarily family ministry. My hope has been to give us a broader look at how Christianity can be expressed. So in many of the episodes, the guest isn't talking about parenting at all necessarily, but rather they're talking about an expression of discipleship, an expression of living out your faith, of following Jesus. And then I'm trying to bridge that over. And that's what we did in the previous episode when I talked to Michael Hendrix, again, the co-author of The Other Half of Church. We talked about how understanding the brain can help with spiritual growth. But throughout the book, they deal directly with parenting. So I asked Michael to stick around and just have a conversation about what we can learn about the brain to help us with parenting. And Michael, I don't even know where to start. There's just so many things that we could cover. Just help us start. What are some things that brain science has revealed that would help us as parents?
Oh, it is front and center. As a matter of fact, if I were given, I do a lot of training of churches and pastors, lead teams, missions groups, teams. But if I was given a chance to train the 6 leading pastors of our country, or to train 6 pairs of young parents who are about to have children, I would pick the young parents who are about to have children, because parenting is the key forward. It's the thing that's going to turn the ship around, because parents who work on their own maturity then naturally and easily pass that on to their children, and then their children don't need to work on their maturity. It's kind of like learning a language. If my wife is from Argentina, so we grew up speaking Spanish in the home because we knew our kids would learn English because we live here.
Yeah.
And so our kids got Spanish for free. So a lot of these maturity skills we have people do, and I had to work hard to get these maturity skills. If we do this well with parents, and especially young parents, and they turn around, they can just pass them easily without even thinking on to their children. And their children don't have to do the stuff that we're having to do now to fill in some of these gaps in our maturity, So, and a lot of the practices we do are really targeted at our infant and child and a level of maturity to try to fill in those gaps so that we can flourish, as highly resilient human beings.
Yes, I love that. Talking about the importance of parents and the impact we can have working with parents. That's why we're doing this thing. And the beauty of talking about passing something on, talking about maturity, but of course how that connects with faith as well. Okay, so you focused in on, focusing on infants, focusing on like parents starting out. Can you help me? So I'm in the middle stages. My children are 11 and 13. It's not something I've passed on. It's not something I even knew to pass on. I mean, what do you advise for us parents in the midst of raising our kids to begin to bring this into our homes and pass that down, as you talked about?
Well, first of all, it's more of an encouragement that, dive into these practices, and the more you work on yourself and fill in some of the maturity holes that you didn't receive from your parents and your community growing up, then the more well-rounded and well-trained relation your kids will be naturally, because they're looking at you, they're copying their brains, whether you like it or not, are copying your examples. And so if you're actually training yourself better to love better, and especially to love in the more intense situations, when maybe we're being tested, and still remain calm, and to also just show your kids, what does Jesus's life look like in this messy world out there. And so start with yourselves. One of the big things we have people do is start to work and work on their joy, build their joy, and practice letting their faces and their eyes shine on the people around them. And their children they just need so much joy. It is so important to the healthy, actually the actual formation of their brains, even as infants. There's this cycle the infant brain goes through, where the little young baby will look to mommy, and their faces, their left eye to left eye, they'll be like this 12 times a second handshake, where they start building joy. And as they build joy, their eyes sparkle and their faces smile, and mommy and baby start going up Joy Mountain, and they get to the peak of Joy Mountain, and the baby will actually get so much joy that the baby will break eye contact. Now, the wise mother here stops smiling and building joy with the baby, and then just lets the baby rest. A lot of times, if you're holding the baby or they're in their crib, you let them break eye contact and you let them get a breather, and you actually kind of rest with them. But sooner or later, probably 30 seconds, a minute or two later, they're rested, they've absorbed all this beautiful joy, and they're back, and they're looking at you, and they're wanting to go back up Joy Mountain again. And then they need some more rest, and then they'll go back up Joy Mountain again, and then they'll need some rest. And they've done some studies, like in the first 4 weeks of the life, no, first 4 months of the life of an infant, the mother and child does this cycle of joy and rest up to 300 to 400 times a day. And that joy rest cycle is really the cycle by which the baby's brain organizes itself on top of a foundation of joy and peace. Because that cycle of joy and rest, that you're building a foundation of joy and peace, you're building a very resilient child that's set up, to learn the rest of the relational skills they're meant to learn as infants really well, with that joy and peaceful cycles with mother and then mom and dad.
300 to 400 times a day. It's just incredible. Keep blowing my mind. As we've talked previously, and I've had the chance to talk to Dr. Wilder, it seems like what you guys are working for, working against, trying to fix, and what we need to follow suit in as parents is really just a mess that's been created by how we do society in our current culture.
Oh, yeah. My wife and I, we live in Boulder, Colorado. We love to go hiking, and one of our hikes takes us by a playground that's usually full of little toddlers just jumping and running and bippity-bopping around and everything. And there's 2 benches on the side of this park. So as we're walking by, I'm always enjoying the kids, the small kids, and I'll look at the bench, and sometimes the parents' eyes are following their kids, and they're excited, and the kids are looking back, but not always. Sometimes I look over the parents, and they're like this. They're just buried in social media themselves. And if they knew that they're 12 times a second, those little infants, the little toddlers' brains are looking and asking, is mommy and daddy happy to be with me right now? Are they with me? Are they excited about me? And that is like nutrition to their brain. It's like, it's as important to them as giving them food and drink and water. And so it doesn't mean if you look at your phone, you've ruined your kid, but as a general pattern,
Right.
Are you letting your face, your eyes sparkle on your kids? Are you with them? Are you enjoying them when they're swinging on the swings? And during the day, when they get home from school, when they're older, does your face light up when they come up the door? Or if they come up the door with a really bad, like maybe they have a bad day at school, does your face meet them in that and go, oh, what's wrong? Did you have a bad day today? And they can tell, oh, daddy or mommy cares about me. Like, our faces are very, very important. We need to learn to live in our faces with our kids and let our faces be full of joy that we're happy to be together, whether we're smiling or whether things went wrong at school, that I am so glad to be with you in the good stuff and also in the hard stuff.
Those things seem so basic. Just to smile, just to be looking, just to meet with a grin when our kids get home, I think when people heard we're going to talk about brain science, you're thinking on a much deeper level than that, but seems so basic. And again, at the same time, I have no idea how much I have my face in my phone. Okay, I had asked about, for us parents who have kids that are older and we're just now being introduced to these things and we're trying to implement these things, how fast does this growth happen or we begin to make headway? I mean, is this something that's going to take time, or is this something that comes on fairly quickly once a parent begins?
Well, it's something you'll do for the rest of your life, but you'll see pretty quick results in your own life. So if you're a mother or a father right now listening to this podcast and you're wondering, I think I've not been doing that. You might think, well, my parents weren't that way with me. My family was not very high joy. We didn't smile at each other and we didn't really attune to each other's emotions when things went wrong. We're just kind of on our own. So the first thing you might want to think, well, I need to start doing that to my kids. But before you start trying to do it with your kids, you need to start building it in yourself first. Since it's a right brain skill, it doesn't come out with willpower. It comes out automatically. You're training the automatic it feels automatic. It comes out like in the 12th of a second, And so start doing some of the exercises, get some of the trainings we do and take the trainings that we teach. There's also some Thrive training in a partner organization where it's a week-long training in relational skills. It'd be great for husbands and wives. It's actually set up for a husband and wife to go through it together. And you'll practice actually building joy with each other. And, with a joy and then rest and then joy and rest. And that is setting you up to do it really well with your kids. And so, and then I also, when I train churches and everything, we always start with joy and rest cycle first, and then we move on to a bunch of other stuff. But really the key is to start with yourself and start building joy and learning how, and then we have some rest exercises too, that practice the quieting system of your brain that helps your brain calm. Because there's a high energy version of love and there's a low energy version of love. And we need to be loving our kids with the high energy and the low energy versions of love. They need to see that and feel that. It's very, very healthy.
Okay, you've mentioned rest a few times. I'm sure it's something that probably many parents like me don't do well. So with older kids, just ourselves, what does rest look like?
That's one of the errors my wife and I made with our kids, is that we were just too intense for too long with our kids. Like when they're teens, if we're having an issue and we kind of go and we're arguing about something or disagreeing, there were times where looking back, where our son or our daughter was showing signs that they needed a breather.
Yeah.
And needed us to slow down, but we didn't get the signs then, and we went too long. And so that's part of what we're doing, is we're kind of cleaning up. All of our kids are in their 20s now. They're out of college and they're working. And so we're kind of cleaning up some of the stuff we didn't do well, and we're reparenting and repairing some of the parenting we didn't do well when they were in the home. And I'll tell you, our kids are responding to it. Like, there's nothing like getting your early 20-year-olds, in the 20s kids, by saying, I've been interacting with Jesus lately, and he's been telling me a couple things I did not do well as your parent, and then sharing that with them.
Wow.
The kids are all ears when it's like, wait, Jesus told you that you didn't parent me well this time you did that. Wait a second.
Yeah.
Does Jesus tells you that? And so there's a very good, it's a really good opportunity to do that.
Great. You were preemptive, because I was wanting to ask, just how is it going? Because I know as you've learned these things and probably tried to apply them, it seems like a pretty tall order to me. With that being what seems to me is such a difficult task, do you think your attitude towards it has made the difference?
Part of it is that they also saw it wasn't just words, because they could see that we're changing. And we were actually, from then on, like when we've having some interactions of high intensity interactions with our kids, we were slowing down. We were actually paying attention to when they needed a breather. We were tuning to their emotions better than we did before. We were much slower to speak. So when Jesus's half-brother says, be slow to speak and quick to listen, that's actually a sign that your right brain is working well. When our right brain's working well, we're much slower to speak. That's because speak is left brain, right?
Yes.
And we're much more to listen. Listen is very much right brain, absorbing what the person's doing, listening not only to the words, but listening also to their gestures, their nonverbal stuff. And one of the things we should look for in our discipleship in churches, honestly, is are you becoming slower to speak over time as you're doing your discipleship? Because that's what discipleship should produce naturally and easily. Someone who loves well is fairly slow to speak and very, 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 very quick to listen.
Yes. Again, incredible. I got to find another word to say. Just such good stuff. I think right there, you've really helped us jumpstart this into our family life. One of the things I wanted to be sure to touch on is discipline. I'd say that's probably an area all of us parents struggle. And I believe what you have learned and what you're putting forth can help us greatly.
Oh, yeah, discipline. I really wish, my wife and I have looked at each other a few times and said, why didn't we learn this 20 years ago when our kids were still in the home? But this is one of them. How do you actually change a child's maturity and character through healthy correction?
Yeah.
And so we talk about that in the book. If you haven't read The Other Half of Church, there's chapters dedicated to this.
Yes.
But our brain actually, when someone actually stays connected to us, when we have a disagreement and I stop acting, like say I see my son stop acting like himself and he says a really cruel thing to his sister because she did something, like she used something of his and got it dirty, whatever. I'm just making this up, right? And so they're in an argument. And, instead of coming in and say, stop fighting, and I react just like they do, to be able to talk to my son in a way that's calm and yet firm and yet loving, and yet I also don't give him a pass. Yes. And basically say, son, I realize that's really, really frustrating when your sister uses your stuff and gets it dirty. And so I think you have a legitimate complaint there. However, some of the words you said to her, that's not the way we speak in our family to each other. Even when someone has misused something that's ours, and they've, your sister really, she has her part of this. I agree with it. But it's possible for you to let her know that you didn't like that and you didn't appreciate it, but still respecting the fact that she is a precious person. She's a child of God, and you can tell her what you told her using words that are very loving. So it's not even necessary for you to be so mean to her. And then, so what I've done, that may sound like a simple thing, but what I've done then is I've giving him a little healthy prick of shame, but I've stayed very, very relational in the shame. There's a toxic bad version of shame, which is like, son, we don't talk that way. Go, I don't want to talk to you. You go to your room, and I'm not going to talk with you the rest of the day, or you're a bad person, or you should know better than that. Some of these things we say to our kids, that they don't help our kids. They actually tell them they're bad, but we don't teach them a way out.
Yes.
But instead we let them know where they stopped acting like themselves. And then we remind them who we really are. In other words, my son, what he did wrong is, legitimately his sister did something that bothered him and it was wrong, but he used some words and some anger and insults against her that's not who we are as a family. It's not who we are as in the family of God, as well as our family. And that's not who we are, but there's a way that you can express that's healthy. And I'll give you a hand if you need a hand, but that's not the way we talk to each other in our family.
One of the things I absolutely loved about your book, The Other Half of Church, is how you dealt with parenting and discipline, the examples and that explanation, and just explaining how that works with the brain. It's been convicting. It's something I'm trying to work through myself and apply myself in my home as well. Whew. Again, so many things I'd love to talk about. Again, it's gone so fast. I hope people will check out your book, The Other Half of Church. Also, check out your work. But just like we did in the last episode where we had a conversation about the other half of church and discipleship, I want us to end with a practical step. Last time you took us to talking about a jacuzzi of gratitude. We talked about joy. Could you give us another practical step for utilizing these concepts of brain science into our parenting?
One good one is when things get intense. Let's say you have a teenager. Teenagers often have big things, big emotions that they have a hard time controlling. That's actually part of their brain rewire when they go through puberty. They need to learn how to control, emotions at another level. Is to actually start taking a breather and even tell your son, or tell your son, tell your daughter, tell them that you see the emotion they're feeling. I can tell you're angry, or I can tell you're afraid, or I can tell you're sad. Something happened at school that made you sad, whatever the emotion is. And if you're talking about something especially intense where there's some either fear or anger, after a while, tell them, let's take a little breather here. This is some intense stuff. Whew. Appreciate you sharing this with me. This is big. And start bringing that language into your family of taking a break, taking a breather, slowing down, letting them recover, And there's even some exercises yourself of being able to take a deep breath. And as you exhale, there's even some good scriptures. One of my favorite is in Psalm 56, where when you inhale, you go, whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in you, O Lord. And do a couple of those breaths in the morning, and you're kind of training your quieting system that, when things get intense, we can take a big breath and we can connect with Jesus and realize that whenever something makes us afraid or brings some fear up, we can trust in him. He's with us.
It sounds crazy to me. I mean, these little things that you've mentioned, taking a breather, taking a rest, that doesn't sound like, as parents, like we're being active if we do that. But I know because I've put some of these things in practice since reading your book, it makes a difference. It works. I'm still learning. Parents, I hope that you'll lean in. I hope you'll get the book, The Other Half of Church, and I hope you'll check out their organization. Again, links are in the notes wherever you find that at. But parents, please lean in. Michael, again, thank you, not just for being here, but for what you're doing. And thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jake, for inviting me on and having such a fun conversation.
I'm so honored we had the opportunity to talk to Michael. Man, just such great stuff. And you may be like me. 3 years ago, probably even just a year ago, if I heard something like this, I'd be like, what's this hippie voodoo? To be honest, my wife's a school teacher, and some of the practices she does, I'll tell her at home, I said, don't use your teacher voodoo on me. But the brain science is there. And then really when you start looking in Scripture, you'll see this. We've just lost it. Parents, I encourage you to lean in, try these little things that's been mentioned, and pursue learning more. You'll have an opportunity to hear some more as I'll talk to the other author of The Other Half of Church, Dr. Jim Wilder, as we dive into some of these things even deeper and look at what it means to be mature and be mature spiritually. Lean in, take that breather, run the water to that gratitude jacuzzi. And as always, it starts with us. You've been listening to Stand Firm Parents. Stand Firm Parents is a production of Stand Firm Ministries in partnership with LifeWord Studios, created by Jake McCandless and Brandon Harrington of Dime Collective. Again, thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe, share, and most importantly, stand firm.